Hello. Today we're going to talk about Lesson 1.1, Graphing Quadratic Functions in Standard Form. It's important to realize that every function has a parent function. Not unlike me, I have a parent, I have two parents, and I have similarities, have differences to my parents. But when we talk about quadratic functions, we're going to talk about the parent function in the form of y equals x squared. So the parent function for the ones that we're going to deal with in this lesson is y equals x squared. And we'll talk about that parent function. We'll talk about what its vertex is. We'll talk about what its axis of symmetry is and the characteristics that it has as the parent. And then sort of the offspring will be the new functions that we discuss. One of the first ones that we discuss is one of the most simplest that we have, y equals ax squared. And we'll talk about what happens when the a is a large quantity, when it's a negative quantity, when it's a fraction. What happens to that function in comparison to the parent function, y equals x squared. We'll make tables to actually graph these. In just a little bit, we'll do some examples of this most basic function, and I will show you how to make the tables, take it straight to the graph to graph the quadratic. In part 2, we'll talk about y equals ax squared plus c. We'll add a constant on the end. We'll kind of see what happens, or what that constant at the end with the ax squared plus c does to the function. After part 1 and part 2, we'll actually have a quiz. I can show you the review stuff. We have problems that will work. We'll have a solid quiz on part 1, part 2 before we move forward. Part 3, we'll add our last part to the function, and we'll go with y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. We'll look at what adding this bx into the middle does to the function. We'll discuss in depth the vertex and the axis of symmetry during this part of lesson 1.1. Finally, in part 4, we'll talk about the maximums and the minimums of these functions. These quadratic functions will either have a maximum or a minimum. And there are certain things that we can look at, we can investigate, and we can determine about each function that'll give us the maximum value or the minimum value. Keep in mind that the maximum and the minimum value are actual points on the graph. So those will be in y-x form with the parentheses around them. I look forward to this lesson. Let's dig in. We'll make sure that we have 2 solid quizzes, one on part 1 and part 2, and then our second quiz of the year will be on part 3 and part 4 before we move on to lesson 1.2. But without further ado, let's get into some work and some examples for lesson 1.1.